We are in the BI Platform studio, and I'm speaking with Mike Ferguson, independent analyst and founder of Intelligent Business Strategies. Mike, you had a session on our Data Warehousing and BI Summit conference in Utrecht earlier this year. And the topic of the session was generative AI in data management and analytics. There's a lot going on in that area, generative AI. Can you give us some examples on how generative AI is being applied in data management currently?
Oh, sure. I mean, as you said, I mean, there's a lot going on. It's appearing in lots of different types of tools involved in data management. For example, in business glossaries, where people have to define business terms and document, what these are and what they mean. Good example of generative AI there would be to help generate the descriptions for you as to what they mean. Similarly, in data catalog, if you discover data in lots of different data stores, all of those physical data assets can get documented in a catalog for every particular field or every column in a table, every field in a file. But again, if you want descriptions of every one of those individual fields or columns, in the past we would have had to type it in. Now we can use generative AI to generate the description for us, and we can either edit that or approve it if it's okay as it is, or reject it even. And then the software would learn to do a better job going forward. In data engineering, the ability to describe what you want a pipeline to do, and then have the software generate the pipeline. Probably the first vendor I saw do that was over a year ago now, probably around about March 2023, which was SnapLogic with SnapGPT. And since then, we've had several other vendors starting to follow in a similar direction, offering that kind of capability. Databases and data virtualization software using natural language queries to query data, so you don't have to figure out how to write SQL anymore. Generative AI can write the code. You just say, here's what I want, here's my question, have it generate the code, which of course is extraordinarily useful. Not only just given that we can generate code, we can therefore potentially see, the use of code generation in data science to even migrate databases, one flavor of SQL to another, to translate stored procedure languages, all of that kind of stuff, in data governance to generate, describe your data quality validation rule. So all the quality checks that you want to have done, you don't have to learn how to code that. You can just say, this is what I want. Have the software generate the code to do the validation checks, or similarly other kinds of governance policies like data privacy policies or access security policies. You don't have to generate the code to do this. Even if it's SQL, you get software to do it for you, and large language models do it for you. So these are all examples. Also, conversational data search to quickly and easily find data in a data catalog if you're a data producer, or in a data marketplace if you're a data consumer. So I mean, there's lots of examples here.
Yeah. And what are key considerations for organizations looking to integrate generative AI into their data management strategies?
It's a very good question, Werner. I think obviously data quality is an important aspect here in order to make sure that we can improve and make sure that what we're getting out of generative AI is accurate in that regard. I think as well also, these large language models need to they're trained on vast amounts of public internet content, but what they're not done is trained on your data, your business terms, your roles and responsibilities within your organization and whatnot. And so, we need to make these large language models aware of your data. And I think that's really where, we need a strategy to make that happen using what's sometimes referred to as retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. I'll get onto that a bit more in a second, but I mean, I think, obviously you also want, if you want to integrate generative AI into your strategy, I mean, you want to make sure that um, you know how you want it to improve people's productivity, if they're involved in governing data, for example, or if they're involved in producing data and analytics, or if they're involved in consuming data and analytics, or even enabling those services. I mean, I think what we're looking to say is, well, how would generative AI improve the productivity of the people working in those different areas, right? I mean, that would be clearly another thing to
Yeah.
think about. And I think as well, minimize the burden of generative AI. I mean, to make generative AI work, we use something called embeddings and vector databases popping up all over the place. I mean, it should be the case that um, it's easy to do retrieval augmented generation, as it's scheduled and automated, that you know, we don't have um, a burden of lots of different vector databases all over the enterprise. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I think database management system vendors have added vector data types and vector functions and whatnot in order to make this easy. And we've also seen pipeline vendors enabling you to take data or even content like text and chunk it and invoke um, embedding algorithms in order to create the vectors needed in order to make generative AI work. So, we really need to get a consistent way of doing this and get it incrementally done on a continuous basis to kind of keep everything up to date because data changes and and minimize the burden of that and make it easy. And then we're going to see the benefits coming from data aware, your data aware generative AI.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And what ethical and privacy considerations should organizations keep in mind when implementing Gen AI in data management and analytics? There's a lot of
Again,
concern about
yeah,
ethical issues and data
yeah.
privacy, of
No,
course. So,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think obviously, the big concern here is I don't want to upload all my data to the cloud
yeah,
in order to fine tune a large language model, right? I mean, I think you have to do this on premises, and that's why we're also seeing the emergence of open source small language models emerging now. I mean, the whole generative AI um, model thing is leapfrogging almost almost week by week at the moment. We see announcements of a new model or being made available, and I think we have to allow this to happen on premises. Um, Also, I think companies have to be able to. I should be looking at buying technology that does what I would call AI observability. For example, doing that in real time to intervene on generative AI. For example, if you get something called a prompt injection, you want to be able to stop that in real time. If you detect personally identifiable data in a prompt, you would want to stop that in real time. Because clearly we don't want prompts being fed into large language models, maybe that are in the cloud or whatever, to be able to, we don't want to pass over personally identifiable information. And so I think AI observability is a growing space. It's a very young space. We're going to see
yeah,
a lot more tooling in this area. But I think that there also needs to be formalization around the use of generative AI as how companies are going to use this. Are they going to define the use cases? How do they train or import the models and fine tune them and whatnot? And are there prompt templates and how do you test out these models and or assess any different prompt templates and things like that? And um, how do you approve something? If you've tested it all and then how is it deployed? We want these kind of things monitored, formalized. We want standardized process to be able to do this and then we also need to monitor these things. I mean, so for example, you would probably want to set thresholds, so if there's kind of fairness thresholds, so that we monitor that, make sure that, we set alerts or accuracy. I mean, it's not just, as you said, it's ethical. We're talking about ethics here. It has to be fair, right? So there has to be some threshold that says we need to monitor this thing for fairness. And if it starts to drop below that threshold, then clearly there's got to be alerts um, that those thresholds have been breached. Similarly for accuracy, and then if it turns out that these things are generating some kind of bias or some kind of hateful or abusive language or something like that,
Yeah.
or you detect personally identifiable data in there, then clearly there needs to be alerts about that, and then we need to, I guess, monitor the health of these um, models, and also not just from an ethical an accuracy standpoint, but also performance. I mean, we got to monitor that too, because clearly, all that's going to happen over the next few years is the number of uses of generative AI is just going to climb. So, um, those are other things that need to be monitored as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just mentioned monitoring and performance, but what kind of strategies would you recommend for continuously monitoring performance, monitoring and improving performance of the Gen AI functionality that companies use?
Well, again, obviously, I think incremental creations of embeddings, things are going to change all the time
Yeah.
within organizations. And so we need some kind of incremental, continuous creation of embeddings, and I think this is where data catalogs are very useful, because data catalogs constantly um, scanning, or sometimes it's called surveying, but so they're scanning a whole range of data sources looking for change. And I think um, as these changes are detected, we will probably need to generate new vectors. Um, and so continuously updating this. Plus, I think, data catalogs are being used, if you like, to make generative AI models aware of your data, and I think that will continue. So I think there needs to be this whole incremental creation and maintenance of embeddings, keeping everything as up to date as possible about what's going on in the you know with respect to changes in your data. Um, and as I said, that will help improve uh, performance. I think also it's not going to be, one monster large language model does everything for enterprises. We are going to see lots of small language models that are focused on specific things, so it's code or whatever it happens to be. Excuse me. So I think we're going to see more of that, but also, again, I would refer back to the whole idea of AI observability that we spoke about a moment ago.
Yeah.
To continuously monitor and improve that, with those thresholds that we mentioned, and AI governance, so that we're on top of this. And I think, it's pretty clear we're already seeing several vendors coming out with AI observability and governance offerings. Just in the last few months, IBM, for example, with watsonx governance, Calibra at their user conference just a few weeks ago, announcing AI governance capability. Data Robot announcing AI observability capability. So we're seeing this starting to roll
Yeah.
out, and there's already demand for it. So I mean, pretty clear that I think we just have to build that out and get that implemented, because now that we have in Europe at least the European Union AI Act, which as far as I recall now is now law, companies are obligated, they have to implement, governance procedures around AI because it's now legislation. So, it's something every company's going to have to do.
Yeah. And it kind of relates to my final question. How would you address transparency and explainability concerns in the use of Gen AI?
Well, it's AI governance tools again, isn't it? I mean, this is what we have to do. I mean, there has to be tooling that helps us do this, because they can't remain black box. But I think clearly we don't want mistakes being made by generative AI because it doesn't know, it'll just generate anything. Now that's the whole idea of hallucinations.
Yeah.
We've got to remove that, and that's clearly where retrieval augmented generation is going to make a difference. And doing that using things like data catalogs and whatnot is going to help tremendously. But very clearly, I think companies need to invest, either create their own or invest in AI governance tooling to be able to help them, get the transparency that's required in order for them to remain compliant with the European Union AI Act, and even to gain the confidence of their own customers. I mean, all it takes is some kind of oversight, perhaps, by organizations that can, if that turns out to become an issue, it could damage customer confidence. But I think companies want to know that this is, safe and easy to use, and therefore they need the tooling to help back it up. So I think you've got to look at either purchasing or creating your own AI governance tooling, as well as formalizing the whole process of defining, developing, validating, testing, approving, deploying all of these things, monitoring them. I mean, that whole thing has to get formalized within organizations.
Yeah.
We can't just leave it as do what you want, and it's got to be properly formalized. And then I think we stand a much better chance of addressing those transparency and explainability concerns that you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike, for the interview.
Okay.